Hello, and welcome back to the Follow Your Spark podcast. I am truly so excited to have Wren here with me today. And this is an incredible human who I actually interviewed on the podcast back in 2022 and met while I was traveling in Asheville. And I had the pleasure of experiencing her products and this beautiful elixir bar in West Asheville with the most nourishing drinks. And this incredible human that you are about to hear more from is an entrepreneur, a bioregional chef, a community herbalist with holistic knowledge that goes deep, and has founded something called the NOHM Collective back in 2015 when she realized that there was this deep intrinsic need in her community for more meaningful connections, conscious consumption, and accessibility to self-care. And over the years, that has manifested in different ways, from products to curating events to virtual and in-person education and doing things all over the country and the world. I was really called to reach back out and have her back on today because I have been so inspired by the work that she's doing in Asheville and the community there, especially after what's been going on with this hurricane that impacted the community. So without further ado, Wren, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today.
It's a pleasure to be here, truly.
Well, this conversation, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. If you want to hear the first version, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I really want to dive into what you've been experiencing on the ground. You know, many people might have heard what's going on in Asheville. Maybe they've seen pictures or seen the news. And I would love to just start out by talking a little bit about what you've been experiencing these past couple months. Anything that's like the first thing that comes to your mind that you feel like would just be relevant or you feel called to share about your current experience these last couple months.
Well, I feel like to encapsulate how I'm feeling, it's this reminder, just like the seasons that we're witnessing shift right now, that this is all temporary. I think that it can be easy to get stuck in where we're at, where I'm at, if something's really alive and in front of me. And I think because we're living in a four seasons environment, there's just like this reminder constantly that, hey, we're cyclical beings.
Mm,
We're connected to nature in that way. And just as we move ourselves into winter, we'll be moving our ability to collectively hibernate and process a lot of what's happening. There's been many waves of feeling. Anything from the initial days where it felt surreal to jumping into mutual aid and feeling activated and connected to then taking a break. I actually left Asheville for a few weeks because I really not only needed a break and the ability to like zoom out and really just look at what was going on from a distance, but I also had some gig work around the country that I still wanted to tend to. And since I've been back the past few weeks, I'm experiencing, what we're seeing here is a collective process.
mm,
And there's been varying levels of feeling very connected and very isolated. And
mm.
so, like the seasons, with the snowfall that we had this morning and the vigorous winds that have been picking up, it's really reminding me that none of this is fixed. There will be movement happening. And I think that's just a larger theme that's really allowed me and our region to tap into the resilience that we have beneath our feet and at our fingertips.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a powerful reminder, like you said, of even if there's an intense circumstance, whether we're deep in the heart of winter or you're experiencing a crisis or your world has kind of turned upside down, to remember that things are cyclical. And like the seasons, things will change, things will evolve, even if things feel very intense or chaotic in this moment, that nothing is fixed. And I've been really curious. I've been kind of seeing snippets of what you've been sharing on social media. And I'm curious, over the last 2 months, I guess since September, how do you feel like you've changed the most personally just from having experienced this?
It brings it brings a lot of emotions on. I'm feeling like pretty grounded this week, but last week I was starting to really experience like a loss of identity and just like a compounding of my actual reality and not just my reality in Asheville as a community member, as an earth steward, as a business owner, but also as somebody who is nomadic at times and has a larger network around the country. And I'm witnessing a lot of collapse in many ways within our gig economy and then here in Asheville specifically. And there's just been a lot of chapters coming to a close and a lot of cords that have needed to be cut. And I think it's, again, to go back to the seasonality of things, because I'm a very seasonal creature. I've been coming through my fall and I've been really harvesting and assessing and cleaning and organizing and preserving and putting away for the winter. And that's a very physical thing that I do with my food stores, with my garden, but it's also an internal process that I've been sitting with for some time. And so to see that mirror and just the amount of processing that I've moved through my body in the last couple months, that was definitely amplified with the hurricane. It's just so incredible what these bodies are able to take. There's definitely a level of processing where I'm like, I should be broken. and I felt broken at times, but I've also been able to pick myself back up together because, picking up the pieces and rearranging things. And so I feel like it's not been easy. There are good days, and there's days when I feel alive and activated with what I'm doing. And there's a lot of days where I just don't really recognize myself. And it's scary, but it's also, I think it's also promising that there's another version of me that's wanting to emerge. And I think that, again, I'm not alone in this. And I know that this is true for many people. And I know that we met a little after the pandemic had started, and I had gone through a similar thing as many of us had globally. And even then, I feel like I'm leaps and bounds from that person who met you back then. And so, yeah, I think that there's just this hibernation that's calling me right now to really go deep and to really just put things on pause or at a bare minimum, not only due to the levels of loss that I've experienced, like locally, economically, and within my support system of losing my entire team who's decided to move away for the next couple seasons, and even remote workers simultaneously have changed their tune. And at the end of the day, even my cat wasn't choosing me. And I can't imagine what he's experiencing or any of the animals. But to be honest and raw, like I reached a place last week where I just felt completely abandoned and completely alone. And while I know that's not true, I still needed to feel those feelings, and I needed to find my own center again within myself and to just whittle away and exfoliate all of the extra noise, the extra responsibility, the extra everything, because going into my deep winter, I need to let go and be with less. And I think that there's a force that can create that in our lives, and that can happen from outside forces. But then there's also, with the theme of your podcast and the way you move through life, it's following that spark and really following the breadcrumbs to the next versions of ourselves and allowing ourselves to let go of these things, even as hard as they are. Because up until this hurricane, I was in deep contemplation of my relationship to endurance, which is a trip to really sit and look at every single facet of my life and what am I enduring? What do I feel like I don't have choice to endure? And what am I getting out of sticking with that project, that relationship, that commitment? And so it's divine timing. Everything's right on time. And I'm grateful to be sitting where I am now, moving through what felt like a dark night of the soul with just some of the beginning feelings of my grief process, to be here now feeling realigned with my purpose and with where I'm going to go, taking it not only day by day, but season by season.
Yeah. So there's so many things I could ask you about what you just said. And I want to start kind of with the beginning of when you were talking about this like loss of identity that you've been experiencing as you've been navigating a time where your business looks different than you thought, your life, like so many things that were a core foundation maybe of how you knew yourself or how you knew your life have been stripped away in a sense. And I would imagine so many other people are experiencing that, and how many people are so used to attaching their worthiness or their value or who they are with these external factors. So without them, it's completely disorienting of, oh my gosh, who am I if I'm not this, if this is not what I'm doing. So I'm curious, what has helped you during this time to come back to that center and remembering that you are not any of those things? What has helped you like reconnect with your identity of who you are and what does that mean?
I think I'm still integrating a lot of that right now, but I think that one of the main affirmations for myself to move through this has been just remembering that like we have this innate power to ask for what we want, and if we're so clear, we will get it. And I think leading up to these moments as of late, I've been asking for some shifts in my life. I've been reprioritizing as I've integrated the past few years of some deep trauma work. And so I kind of giggle a little bit in retrospect, being like, all of this that I'm going through is creating so much space to actually get me to where I've been asking
Mm.
for like several months, even like almost 2 years. I've been holding a prayer for a certain way of living.
Mm.
And I think I'm really on that path. And it's taking this constant check in and devotion to myself, to my mothership, to
Mm.
create more space in my life, more space energetically and physically, so that I can actually create larger, or at least welcome larger change in my life to get me on a truer path.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to close my business. As you know from the past, I've designed my business to allow me to move about the world with a certain level of grace and freedom. I feel really grateful for that because I work very holistically in the way that I approach business. And so I've really created a business model that is more part-time and cyclical. And so it's okay that I'm going to step away from my main operations for the next few months. And I'm
Mm.
going to really dive in deeper into that integration of, okay, this way of being, this thing that I wanted, that I've desired, that I've even sometimes caught myself fantasizing about, wondering, will I ever even get there? Now that
Mm.
that is becoming my reality, can I hold that? And I think that's a larger inquiry for us as humans.
Mhm.
Like these things that we desire, that we want, whether they be dreams or goals, when they actually show up, do we have the capacity to hold them,
Mm.
actually integrate them and become them?
Yeah, totally. So I heard in what you said, one thing being perspective. Like you were able to look at this and have the perspective of, wow, actually, the past couple of years, I've been asking for this big change. And I could view these circumstances as a way that's supporting me to facilitate the change I've been asking for.
Mhm.
So to remember that each of us have perspective. And again, that's not to say that this isn't hard or challenging or devastating in any way. And being able to ask yourself, what is the perspective that you hold? And what perspective do you want to have when you're looking at your circumstances, whatever they are, whether this or otherwise? And I'm also hearing the importance of time and space for reflection and integration, and knowing that when you've experienced a massive change like this, that it is so nourishing to have space to reflect, to
Mhm.
have space to be still, to have space to integrate all of these things. And, like you said, gratefully, you've been able to build a life and a business where you kind of have that built in. And I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom or things that you might suggest for other people who maybe that wasn't a part of their life, or they don't know how to do that. They're not used to operating like that. Like, what guidance might you share with them?
Mm. Well, it's interesting that you asked that because I'm actually writing a book right now.
Mm.
And it's not anything I ever thought I would be doing in my life. I like to make things that are with my hands. I mean, typing or writing is tactile, but you know me. I make food, I cook, I create food as medicine. I make beverages with the Mertails, with my elixir company. I sprout seeds and I create life in that way. And this calling to write and to really not only reflect, but to extract this wisdom that I've been able to unlock within myself by aligning myself with seasonal living, and also the experiences that I've had, being able to travel the world and network the way that I have. It's been such an initiation to come into writing. And this book that I'm writing is a cookbook, but it's also going to be storytelling about moving through biodiverse ecologies and being able to see the nuances, not only season to season, but within those transition periods, which you can see emulated on the edge of bioregions. We go to the edge of 2 regions to find the most biodiversity. And when I look at the way that the seasons shift, that is also a very diverse place, where you're almost blending. I feel like spring and fall are these like transitionary seasons to get us to the full spectrum of summer and winter. And so while I don't really have a one size fits all or like a foolproof recipe, what I've been reflecting on even today in particular, as I was entering passages in, is that if we can find ways to emulate seasonality into our lives, no matter where we live, or if we can even further unplug and go somewhere to experience those transitions, we can then start to integrate that and take that back into our lives. I grew up in Florida, so constant summer almost. Like we had some minor shifts, but in general, I didn't get much of a taste of the seasons. And so coming up to North Carolina for most of my life because of my father, I got to get those little tastes and I got to see the leaves change and I got to see my idea of a white Christmas growing up were like white sandy beaches. And then I got to start seeing snow and just even in the discomfort of a very cold day with wind and snow, which I wish I was more excited about that, but Florida girl here. I feel like I still was able to have my curiosity piqued to look at nature and be like, wow, what can I learn from this? And being a traveler too, it's like, how did the nomads do it? And how did people do it before? And so I think looking at our food, for one, that is like an amazing way to start integrating seasonality. Like anyone that has access to a farmer's market, that's like one of the easiest ways to plug in, whether it's through a CSA or through going to the farmer's market every week. I go to multiple farmer's markets a week because it's a community thing too for me, a social time. And being able to move my diet through the seasons with what's appropriate to be eating during that season. I also think that in North America, we've become programmed and addicted to this very fast paced, like goal oriented lifestyle that just keeps us continuing to climb and climb and hustle and hustle. And, is there anything honorable about the hustle? I think there can be if we can also take time to pause, reflect, harvest, and integrate. And so, it's interesting with what we're dealing with here locally because we're moving into, our leaf season. Well, we're in the thick of it now and we're coming into all the holiday markets. And this is when Asheville in particular makes 60% of its revenue, as well as all of the makers, the business owners, like all of us are typically making our nest egg during this time. And I'm, not one to rush into every market during this time of year because personally, my high time for productivity is like spring into summer, into those like transitionary weeks into fall. And so I've just noticed like a resistance in me to even as much as I've attended some markets over the past month and I've put myself out there in community, really showing up to the various communities that I'm a part of in Asheville. I've experienced where I myself am seeing a lot of resistance when it comes to commerce. And I found way more integration showing up in mutual aid and like cooking 600 meals a day just to feed the people who can't feed themselves. Like that's lit me up more. And that's been like the easiest thing I've done in weeks is cook 600 meals. Like the back of my hand, like so easy because that's aligned with who I am within these shifts. And it is a gift of mine, because I do chef for part of my living. But I just think, yeah, like we've come so far away from natural rhythms that any way that you can bring yourself back into balance. Also coming into more coherence with your water, which we talked about a lot in the last podcast, and finding your circadian rhythm again, I think those are some starting points that I'll definitely be addressing in my book and continuing to talk about on the air.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for this book. That sounds so magical. And it's something that I for sure too have been leaning into more of what does it look like in me and to eat and nourish my body in a way that is more aligned and more in harmony with the seasons and the earth and remembering, like you said, that like it wasn't always that we could go to the grocery store and get whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. And what does it look like to eat in a way that's more in tune with what's available
Mhm.
and let go of needing to have it all now, and explore what that means to be in reciprocity with the earth, with each other, in a way that supports and aligns with each of us.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious. I loved what you said about this like edge and blend of like the cusp of things, the cusp of seasons, the cusp of big life transitions.
Mhm.
And we're here now. It's November 22nd when we're recording this, that we're in like the heart of fall. We've got another couple weeks. And as we're transitioning into winter, is there anything, whether herbally or food wise, that you feel like is important, particularly in this cusp? And I'm also curious if there's a way that that might translate to other things beyond food, like something that listeners can maybe learn from that.
Mhm.
Do you get my drift a
Yeah,
little?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally.
Like blending time.
Yeah.
Pausing this interview for a moment to say that if you're in one of these blending times in your life where you're on the cusp of change and transformation and it feels scary and you're craving support, let's talk, my friend. I know in these times of metamorphosis, when you're in this goo phase of things are breaking down and you're not quite sure how it's all going to come together again, it can be easy to feel lost or uncertain or revert to old ways of being because change and growth can feel scary. If you don't want to navigate that journey alone, coaching can help. I offer free 75-minute consultation calls where we'll get clear on the vision that you have for yourself and your life. We'll explore what struggles or challenges are getting in your way, and then we'll hone in on what tools or practices could support you most in bringing that dream vision to life. If working together feels like a mutual fit, we'll talk all about that and see how coaching could help you step into that next level vision. If that's the kind of support you're looking for, go to ginacasbara.com and book a free consultation call. I can't wait to hear what dreams and visions are on your heart. All right, let's get back to the interview and hear what supports Wren to move through these blending times.
The blending time. There's that blend. Then I'm also just thinking right now about our own genetics and our own lineage, because there's so many ways to approach food as medicine, and it can come seasonally, it can come through our lineage, it can come from any culture that we're immersing ourselves in. I think that as we're in this transition, what I'm looking at is the ratio of what's on my plate. And so in the summer, where I'd be eating more cruciferous foods, water-based foods, not necessarily 100% raw, but definitely more uncooked foods that are maybe slightly masticated through a shredder, or the way that I cut something just to help me pre-digest a little bit. There's definitely more of an emphasis on raw, watery, crunchy foods for the summer, where as we move into the winter through this fall portal, we're seeing, at least I'm seeing on my plate, and many of us here in Appalachia, the return to the soups and the broths. So maybe a little bit of salad, like some bitter greens. I literally threw a bunch of seeds in my garden for one last go, and I just was harvesting before the snow radish and mustard greens, and it barely took effort. I've been building my soil for years, so the effort's compounded, but I didn't have to get out there every day and water and do all of this vigorous stuff. I just let the seeds sprout and do their thing. And so I'm able to eat these bitter greens, bitter tubers that are really in their raw form or slightly cooked form are going to support my digestion as I move into like squash and potatoes and beets and like all these yummy things that live under the ground that are really going to root us and ground us into this transition. So a lot more cooked foods. And moving from like a watery raw-ish ratio that might be higher in the summer, it's like the broth is still considered water. We're starting with water, but now we're working with bones and with warming spices to warm ourselves up from the inside out, like ginger and cumin and clove and, a lot of these chai spices. I think that's one thing. I'm also seeing myself gravitating more towards bread. Just like a lot more carbs, fattening myself up for the winter to stay warm, if you will, but finding comfort in those foods because, there is more time that's opening up for reflection. And not to say that as we move into fall and winter, it's not productive. Anybody who's growing food knows that we're still every day out there harvesting, again, processing, cleaning, even canning and drying and all those things. But when we make it to winter, the idea is to fully come to a slow pace,
Mhm.
come into that sacred pause where even the animals are less active and we are less active. And so to have so much food already prepped and stored, it makes life easy to where we can stay within our bubble or stay within our sphere of those more contemplative, introspective times to perhaps be like creating with crafts and things that maybe we didn't get to during the busier times of year.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that theme of ratios and the theme of both the ratios and what you're eating and noticing how that changes with the seasons. And also to speak back to what you were saying as far as the time for commerce and markets and what you're feeling called to do right now. So, what I'm hearing is, if people are experiencing any type of transition or edge, whether you're in Asheville and you're going through this particular experience, or it's weather related or life related or anything else, to be mindful of what ratios you're feeling called towards. And that might be ratio of rest and work.
Mhm.
Maybe you're going through a time where you are feeling called to be more inward and more introspective and more creative. And that doesn't mean, like you said, that there's not still an element of activity or productivity, whatever that is. There's always the yin yang, the little bit of black and the white and vice versa. And to be able to ask yourself, what does that ratio look like for me right now? And can I allow myself to move through the season that I'm in and honor that?
Yeah. Mhm.
I
Yeah,
love that.
I think it's a key having that introspection, being willing to move some things around. Because I'm speaking as a person who does not have children, does not have a family yet, even though that's part of my path that I've been opening up for myself. So I can only speak from my perspective, but I think that dovetails nicely into community care and coming out of our own space of I don't know, what I've identified with in the past is self sabotage, feeling like, oh, I don't have the support that I need to even do that. Or I've
Mm,
talked with mothers who feel like they don't have the space to create that time for themselves. And I don't want to speak from a place of privilege because I realize that we all have different things going on. We have different varying levels of responsibility. I mean, owning a business with two product lines and running a collective of the apothecary and the bar and all the collaborations, it feels like I have many kids. And I have a garden that I'm growing like hundreds of things in and a cat. So in my own way, like I mother, but I do mother in a different way where sometimes I can put things down. Maybe I wouldn't say ignore something, but I can somewhat reprioritize in the moment. And so I feel like that really leans into community care and what I've seen come online a lot with our ability as a very creative and do it yourself and resourceful community here in Asheville, several of the communities here that I'm a part of. It's been really beautiful to see just honestly the way people are stepping up every single
mm,
day and the support that is coming in troves, not only from our centralized space here, but also the region, the country.
mhm,
It's been
mhm,
incredible to see just such action and such
mhm,
love and such nourishment. I
mhm,
mean, I don't even, it's hard to say. I know with at least the relief kitchen I'm associated with, we've already passed 40, 50,000 meals that we've passed out in 2 months.
mhm,
Multiply that by the amount of businesses that are cooking for the community and
mhm,
several of the relief kitchens. It's probably close to 500,000, if not more,
mhm.
of just food
Yeah.
that's been provided. And just for somebody to be given a meal and to not have to do the dishes and to get out and see a smiling face of the person handing you that home cooked, warm meal that's been cooked with love and fun. It's such a game changer. And I think that the varying levels of positions that we hold in community, coming back to the basics of
Mm,
those needs, of water, of food, of a cup of coffee. It's been very accessible here. And so I'm very proud of our community. I'm very
mhm,
proud of the families here. I'm proud of the business owners. I'm just honestly so inspired and so proud to live here and to see the resilience emerging that I
mm,
know is going to take a while, but just as our spring greens start sprouting and those first signs of, the next season emerge in these warmer months, we'll have gone through quite a period of processing and pain and
Mhm.
darkness. And from that, so much strength
Yeah.
and so much hope and so much connection that we've
Mm.
been able to forge across community here. That's been honestly such a trip and such a pleasure to witness.
Mm. And even from the outside looking in, I've sensed what you're describing, and it does feel very unique and special. And I got a taste of that community that you're describing when I was in Asheville for 2 months in 2022. And I'm curious if you were to think about like the ingredients that help create a thriving, supportive community, what does Asheville have, and what could other cities, other communities maybe learn from what's going on right now that you feel is really contributing to this level of community support?
I love the way you put that. Definitely speaking my language. Um, hmm. I feel like there is this entrepreneurial spirit that you've witnessed that Asheville's known for. So there is this, I'd say like collective energy of it's like self reliance in a way, but it's also community connected because while we do have larger corporations here, we still have such a large amount of privately owned businesses that are family run, that are collectively ran, co op ran, and so we've really set an example, I think, in this country for just like the support and the commitment to doing things in this way, where there's a lot of risk takers here, you could say, because it takes a lot of risk to run a business and it takes a lot of vulnerability. And in true Asheville spirit, collaboration is at the heart. And so, whether that's as a restaurant owner or an artist in the River Arts District or a musician or various things, there is still this spirit of we're all in this together. We're going to take these risks. We're going to establish these dreams and make them a reality. And I really love that. I think there's just this fertile energy here. We are on top of a quartz bed. And so there is this very fertile energy.
Mm.
Also mirrors the water and the soil and the wisdom and this bosom motherly energy of these mountains that I
Mm.
think supports enough of us to take those risks
Mm.
and also puts us in the face of, I think, failure, which can create more learning and more lessons that can allow us to unlock deeper parts of our true expression. And
Mm.
as you're aware, like we definitely have become a hotspot for tourism. And so as a business owner, I'm not against it by any means. I think there's definitely a balance that we've been seeking as locals. A lot of us get it in the winter, honestly, because that's when everybody wants to leave because it gets cold. But yeah, I think that there's this constant exposure to a life that enough of us have chosen to try out that has
Mm.
a ripple effect. And
Mm.
that's not in opposition to every system that's in place, but we're definitely trying to bridge newer facets of our world here.
Mm. Mhm. So interesting. And like you said, that balance of self reliance and community connection and community support, that it sounds like the community is made up by a lot of really strong individuals, entrepreneurial spirit, willing to take risks. And also, because so many people can relate to that, there's also this interdependence and collaboration that you're all supporting each other. You all kind of understand the journey that, like you said, so many people have chosen.
Yeah.
And it's also this sense of community rallying and support of what does it look like for us to create something together as well as have our own like individual dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's such an invitation that this particular bioregion extends to us, which in a lot of ways is to, hey, come here and figure out what healing looks like to you. Come here and maybe crack open some self work.
Mm.
Not everybody obliges. However, the invitation is certainly here, and you see it not only in the way that we have like all this, like I call it a full spectrum city because we
Mm.
have such a high level and quantity of healers in the holistic health realm. We've got so much art and music, so much culinary creation. Like, it really is this like epicenter that I think when we talk about ingredients, we go back to good water. Like, how are we going to make our soup for the
Yeah.
winter? We got to get good water, because if we're using water that's been contaminated or that's become chaotic and we boil that, we're actually, this is just turning into a science lesson, but there's a part of letting water sit, and you can evaporate a certain amount of chlorine, depending. But if you put your hand in the chlorine, like in chlorinated water, your body will actually absorb it in less than a few seconds. It's crazy how quickly we absorb chlorine topically, like
Mm.
versus internally. And if there is other treatments or contaminants, when you boil water, you're actually compounding those ingredients, like you're concentrating them. And
Mm.
so when we think of ingredients, like water is always number one. And then we look at soil. And then we look at, we could say creative expression, like the artist way is so big here. I think those are like some of the main ingredients that have called me here to these mountains since I was a young child.
Mhm.
So I've been passing through most of my life, and I've certainly felt it and been on the periphery around Asheville, and then eventually started making intentional trips here in college, and then eventually moved here. And I just passed my 10-year anniversary as a resident.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. There is something to celebrate amidst all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, it sounds like the community is coming together locally to support each other. And from an external perspective, for people who are listening who don't live in Asheville, what support is most needed? How can people get involved? What would you say?
It feels it feels like such a complex answer because my yin says time to
Mm.
integrate, time for slowness, space. And then my yang is I need to pay the rent. I need people to buy my things. We need people to show up and put themselves in the chairs at the tables to all these amazing businesses that are feeding all of us. And yeah, it's very complex. And so I feel like for anybody who has been through Asheville and experienced our town and just the magic that I feel like our community conjures up here, I'd say perhaps think about places that you went, experiences that you had, venues that you went to a kick-ass show at, and where were the memories made, and is there a way to support those industries, through donations, or if they have things to purchase, if inventories are replenished for goods and
Mm.
services, perhaps look there when you're thinking about your holiday shopping, because I think that I look forward to people returning to here because it's always such an amazing perspective to zoom out and see Asheville through somebody's eyes who just felt called to come here or was
Mm.
told to come here, you know? And so I still want to keep that alive, and I still want people to feel like they're welcome here. And
Mm.
at the same time, if there's a way that you can lower your footprint here by maybe not coming physically, but still supporting our economy so that we can welcome you back soon, that would be a huge ask. I know with my own reality, not having as much support on the day to day anymore, I've created as much product as I can the past few weeks, and I've refilled all of my refrigeration. We're going to be launching a new website next week. I had an incredible design group donate some time to help me give a lift to our project so that I could actually really represent what we're doing in a better light because I'm not the most tech savvy, and I threw something together that's worked lately. But we are going to be doing this launch, and we're going to be playing towards, this holiday scape of consumption in a mindful way with Small Business Saturday and whatnot. And I'm going to be making sales until I run out. And when I run out, my shop will hibernate until the spring. And
Mm.
that's like a boundary that I'm setting with myself where I created my ceiling. I made enough product to help budget certain expenses for the next few months. And I'm going to save and reallocate a lot of that income towards building a new team and making some upgrades within my business. Because
Mm.
this is, again, like that time where I'm looking around being like, it'd be really cool to upgrade that because then I could do that better. And also, I was literally receiving all of my bulk menstruum during the hurricane, like straight up, with like large drums of raw, organic, unfiltered apple cider vinegar were showing up, like hundreds of gallons. And other menstruums that I source, and people were like, "Oh, are those barrels of water in your front yard?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's vinegar. You probably don't want to drink that." Like in that way, but I'm stocked. Like I'm ready to go. Just as much as I'm harvesting from my garden, I have completely filled my kitchen, and so I've got everything I need to make medicine. And at the same time, I'm making what I feel is comfortable to make with the capacity that I'm able to operate at. And when I run out, I run out, and then I'll be back again. So, the shop is open. We'll be getting our lift and our relaunch next week with the holiday. And I ask y'all to come to my table and explore. And I also am grateful for any support that comes through, because what I'm going to be working on this winter is a lot of curriculum for a couple of holistic
Mm,
healing cohorts I want to lead next year. I'll
mhm,
be wrapping up certain aspects of my cookbook. I'll also be putting together more submissions for my Substack, because I felt that's a very safe place for me to express myself in
mhm,
the wake of a censorship happening on social media. So I'm really utilizing this time to also extract and curate a lot of offerings that I'd love to bring to the community. And so any purchases is honestly a vote to keep our business open. And so I
mhm,
thank you for that. And I can also provide some links as well for some nonprofits that I'm associated with, Grassroots Aid Partnership. We're
mm,
cooking about 600 meals a day. We're servicing the elderly and low income housing, as well as the Appalachian Herb Collective and Madco Herbal Collective, which have several days a week. There are community apothecaries popping up, not only in Asheville, but within all the surrounding towns around us, to provide free medicine for people of all walks of life. And we also have our beloved Asheville and Heartwood WNC, which have been working around the clock to provide resources like generators and lumber and tiny homes and RVs, amidst all the food and distribution of resources that have been happening since day one. And these are just to name a few. There's so much amazing work happening here. So we can provide some in the show notes, and then also, again, reflect what are those precious moments you had in our town, and can you just send a little love to those people? Let them know you're thinking about them. And
mhm,
we look forward to receiving you all soon.
mm. That's beautiful. Yeah, I'm in the middle of reading Service Berry by Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Great.
Yeah. And it's very much about this kind of question that I feel like we've been talking about of what does it look like to be in this reciprocal world of gift giving and reciprocity and all of that, while we also live in this world of commerce, and how do those things go together? And she was talking about the difference between, if I give you a gift of a sweater that I make, like for you, how you're going to take care of that gift, versus if you were to buy something at a store and not know the clerk and not know anything about it, how you would take care of that
Yeah.
differently. And what would change if we, I mean, could look at everything and think of it as that gift of both a gift from Mother Earth, a gift from each other, and interact with each other in a way that brings in that care and love. So it reminds me of what you were saying. If I just made 600 meals and poured in so much love to these meals and had these face to face interactions with these people, and you're a reminder to people listening that if they've experienced Asheville, if there's a business that you've experienced, if there's a person that you met, like remembering that energetic connection and starting there and seeing how you might be able to support. And Robin in this book kind of painted this picture of, if we all leaned into that, even little by little, more and more, what the ripple out impact would be
Mhm.
by thinking that way.
Mhm. I love that. And I totally got a suggestion on my Audible for that book. So I'm going to download it as soon as we get off, because I'm so there. And yeah, I think that that balance between commerce and gift giving, gifting can come in the form of so many things. I think that a lot of our ability to persevere through this is not just through monetary donations, but it's the amount of attention that we've received and the amount of people. Like I have had industry partners from all over the country checking in on the NOHM Collective, sending us herbal medicine for our team, as well as to distribute to our network, and really just asking how we're doing. And even though a lot of us, especially in those earlier weeks, probably didn't have the capacity to answer every text and every DM and every email. Just knowing that like we were being thought about, that there
Mm,
was love and hugs being sent to the nervous system of our community
mm,
really feels like one of those ways to show up. And
mm,
it's felt, it truly is. And so I feel like that balance has definitely been struck in a way, even to the point of us becoming over resourced with certain things where we've actually had to liquidate certain distribution hubs in Asheville, and people have had to move on to the next disaster, because we're not the only place that's been even hit in the last 2 months. Like my brother and his wife are flying right into southern Spain when that whole natural disaster happened, and my family in Florida was just dealing with the same hurricanes. And I was feeling it throughout my entire family globally. Like we were all in that space, and yeah, I think that there's a lot of gratitude for the support we've received, and I
mm,
feel like a lot of us have been very good stewards of
mm.
any attention and any donation and any commerce that we've received.
Yeah. If you were to think about like a vision for the future of the world, that like anything from you that you learned from this experience that you could imagine a future of, wouldn't it be nice if, what are some of those things that we can just speak out into existence, like here and now, and imagine a world where people interact in a certain way or support in a certain way? What would you wish for the future of the world, whether in crises we're experiencing or anything else?
What I wish for the world is for more hydration, I think, and like regulation and awareness of our bodily systems and how that also is connected to the world that we're surrounded by, just like that intrinsic connection that we do have. Because even in my small niche communities, it feels like sometimes a lot of the world is still very disconnected or disassociated from curiosity and from intuition. And I feel like those are two really, I don't even know what to call them. They're huge opportunities, I think, for any human to, oh wow, look at this light coming in. Like glowing. Um, I think that these are opportunities for us to live a more enriched life. And I wonder if anybody that's in a position of power or in a position of perceived change on a local or a global level, what would happen if we were more hydrated, if our nervous systems were more regulated to where we were responding versus reacting to things? Like, how would that have a ripple effect? And I think that that comes into play with the elements that we are made of and that we're surrounded by. So if we can come into cleaner water that's more coherent, if we can remineralize ourselves with the soil that's growing our food, if we can tap into the teacher that is fire and the wisdom of the earth. Wow, wouldn't that be wouldn't that be something? Um, Definitely I see that happening on certain levels. And I think personally, one of my greatest tools and expressions is connection to my intuition and my curiosity. So
Mhm.
that's what I wish for the world. All of that.
Yeah, for sure.
All of that.
Sending
Yeah.
energy to that 100%, and I completely align with that vision and agree and see and believe in that power of curiosity and intuition, and how often people don't give themselves that gift for a variety of reasons, or just feel like it's just so far outside of the lifestyle that has been created or that they're used to, and how challenging it can be. And like I said, I'm not a mother either. There are plenty of circumstances that I don't have that I can't speak from. And, wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world where people had more access to curiosity, intuition, hydration, nervous system regulation? Like, what would that change
Yeah.
how we respond to everything?
Yeah. I think that it's less about how something looks and more about how something could feel.
Mm,
And this, I think, speaking to what I was mentioning earlier with holding a clear vision and being open to my reality shifting to allow space for something else to emerge.
mhm,
A lot of that has been me being in a deep state of not what would something look like, but like how would I feel in this other way? What
mm,
what are the smells I want to smell? What are the sounds I want to hear? The frequencies I want to feel? Like this can get esoteric and quite quantum, but it's real and it's a way to actually move ourselves into a new reality, to actually bridge in reality before we get there. And it's
Mhm.
amazing to see how things will start reorienting around us when we even start imagining what's possible and we get
Mhm.
really clear and we get dedicated to what could that be like. And it can take things like a natural disaster, or I like to say a natural opportunity to occur to really
Yeah.
invite that invitation in. And in some ways, it can feel like it's being forced on us. But I think a lot of us want something different in
Mhm.
some way. And even if we're not exactly ready for it, can we still imagine it?
Yeah. And I've been thinking so much about vision and manifestation and all these things that I feel like have been a topic of conversation for the last, 10 plus years or whatever. And I am feeling so much more called myself to hone in or live in what is this vision for the future that I see for myself as well as I see possible for the world. And like you said, what does that feel like? It's so funny what's coming to my mind right now, and I can't remember whose Instagram account I saw this on. I So if you're listening to this podcast and it was yours, I'm sorry for not saying this, but someone mentioned they were like at a track or something, and they saw this guy who was just at the end of the like line of the track, like huffing and puffing, and but he hadn't ran anywhere. So she walked up to him and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm just like getting my body into the feeling of what it's going to feel like when I get to the end." She
Mm,
was like, "Oh yeah, like how could we bring that into other realities of he's literally like breathing heavily and like feeling in his body. So his brain's, yep, this is how I'm going to feel when I run however many laps I'm going to run. And this is what it's going to be like. And I've really been asking myself that question of like ways to get into that feeling state that maybe you don't know exactly what you want for the future. And you do know how you want to feel in your body, what curiosity feels like, what intuition feels like, any of those things. So I just loved that example. And one thing that keeps like flashing in my brain that I want to go back to and ask you that you said that sounds a little bit what you just brought up, but you talked about previously endurance
mm,
and being present to what you were enduring and how something like what you experienced with this hurricane, maybe even something like COVID, brought this question to the surface. So I'm really curious if you can speak more about what you learned about maybe pre hurricane, what you thought you had to endure, and then what you realized about endurance and what you maybe felt like was a choice or wasn't a choice, or just how your context about what you were enduring changed through this.
well, I feel when I started thinking about endurance, I think that the initial contemplation was really emerging around this solar eclipse that we had this spring. Because I remember when we had a large solar eclipse viewing with the Path of Totality back in 2017. And my team and I had gone all the way up to Oregon, set up a huge gnome installation. We were living on this site for almost 2 weeks and we were with tens of thousands of people. And I remember leaving that container feeling like every chakra in my body was spinning. Like I was just not even, I hadn't even really started slowing down at that point in my life. And I was still, I think, like towards the end of my 20s, and I just was in this like hustle mode. And so I started slowing down and I started just by force of like fatigue and just feeling energetically ungrounded. Like, what can I harness from this? Like, I just experienced a huge life, I just witnessed something that not everybody gets to witness. And what are the implications of these larger cosmic forces and elemental forces that are around us? And was it even a good idea that I went and did that? And I felt, yes, I have to go to the next one. There's something there that I really want to absorb or be exposed to. Like it's this solar energy. And so through that, my contemplation through endurance started earlier
Mm,
this year. And what it led me to was actually the theme became the landlordship that was over me. And that has to do with my commercial property that I was renting and my residential property that I was renting. And being a business owner and not having a boss, like I am my own boss, but not having this structure over me, I wasn't even thinking about landlordship. I just felt like I was in these really awesome agreements to get me into these spaces where I felt safe, like I could actually nestle, be safe. And the thing about Asheville is like our housing market and our commercial market have been volatile for many years. And living here for 10 years, I've almost had to move every year and a half to 2 years because of whether it's turning a house into an Airbnb or selling it because the market is up or because of black mold, because we are still in a temperate rainforest. And so those are
Mm,
the reasons why I have had to continuously move. And I've
mm,
continued to live here, but I've had to schlep my stuff everywhere and just constantly reset. So I had myself, this is probably TMI, but I'm going to get to a point here. It's like I had myself in a 3-year commitment with these two places. And I was like, oh my gosh, a 3-year lease? That's amazing. Like I am going to grow and I don't even know what's going to happen, but I don't have to move my stuff for a few years. So that's great. And in that time of finding myself in that stability that I was able to carve out for myself through those relationships, my growth accelerated
mm,
and my ability to feel stable and to feel secure accelerated. And at the same time, because these are also real people managing real land, they change and the market changes. And so I thought, wow, I got a good deal. One of my places is rent controlled, and I've got an internal agreement where I really get to thrive as a steward and a gardener and a protector of this land. And I can run the little Airbnb and I can, allow that to help fund my stewardship of this property for this owner so that when they come back, they can come into a place that's been very much tended to and designed systematically to support long-term growth on this property.
mm,
Sounds dreamy, right? Totally. And then with my commercial space, like I felt like I was in the public eye, like my rent didn't change too much until later when I realized it kept changing. Minimal land to steward. It was more about what was happening on the inside. But over time, things fell out of alignment with me and these people. And because I was in this contract and I didn't feel like I could break it because I made this commitment to myself, I'm not going to move for a few years. Like, what is going to happen? And I think, like, the larger lesson here is just, and like,
mm,
sometimes when like, when you can get connected to your intuition and you can trust yourself, when it's time to go. And
mm,
if you know that it's time to go, are you going to stay because it feels
mm,
like this is a common thing that we deal with relationally across the stratosphere as humans, and we see how nature reacts and relates with itself, and so we're like doing the opposite constantly. We're like, how much can we not be like this
mm,
on a larger sphere? And then of course, there is a lot of reciprocity and biomimicry and things that bring us back to our cycles. And so with this eclipse, things amplified and interactions happened, and I realized that I needed to like just leave this situation, both situations. I learned that there was Roundup being sprayed at the commercial place. They had raised my rent like 6 times since I started being there. Other things happened with the residential space. And I felt this was really what kicked off a huge amount of introspection because I thought that because I had 3 years, like I was going to make do. And I
mm,
realized 2.5 years in, it's time to go. Like the frequency has changed. This is not in alignment with you. The more you find out, the less you're aligned. And is it in my highest power to stay here? Is it in my higher self to just grin and bear it and know that what I'm putting my money towards, what I'm putting my energy towards, the place that I'm resting my head or resting my whisk at the end of the day, am I in alignment with that?
mm,
And I felt in alignment with so much other things in my life that I just didn't even think that like the people who held contracts over me would fall out of alignment. I thought when I leave, like I leave or I choose to stay. But I think that like when we experience things like natural disasters or phenomenons or things like that, there's an electromagnetic pulse that will
mm, mm,
some of these scenarios where things will just literally become amplified. Like it just happens on a frequency level. And if you're in tune in any way, or if it becomes, even if you're not in tune, you're still being affected. And so I really feel like that was a huge initiation for me to move my entire everything
mm,
that I've built for 10 years almost here within the same month. I mean, talk about being broken. I have never been through so much pain in my life, moving and taking stock of everything that I own. And when you open up that portal, you really start thinking about who am I giving my energy to? What am I committing myself to? why am I committing to that thing? And it can be hard to walk away from things, but I think in any case, when you have an opening and you're actively like, okay, what else is there behind the curtain? It can be an endless process. And we really just have to surrender to it and trust that if this isn't feeling right, why is it not feeling right? And is that beyond repair? Like sometimes it's good to endure things for sure to get somewhere. And sometimes it's not. And we're just kidding ourselves, or we don't want to make the change or go through the effort or finance the change because it's a lot, you know? And I'm a creature of change. I love change. And my medicine the past 5 years has been, what does it look like to not jump at change the moment it's presented to me? Like,
Mm,
is it worth enduring? Is this aligned? Do I feel nourished by this, even if it's hard? And that's really got me to a place where even in my present, I've lost a lot. And I don't know if it's really a loss. It's just, it's a reorientation. And there's the ending of some things. And
mm,
that happens. And
mm,
yeah, like I said, it's easier to talk to you now because I've gone through a lot of that lately. But even in the midst of it, it's sometimes like when you get sick as an herbalist, you forget everything you know. And you have to phone a friend and be like, hey, what herbs do I need to take right now? What am I doing? None of this is working. And so, again, leaning back into community and also knowing when it's time to like recluse and to pull the
mm,
tendrils back. And that can be a cyclical process that we go
mhm,
through constantly throughout life. It's
mhm.
always happening.
Yeah. And I feel like it goes back to what you said of you can have the self-reliance and the strength, and also remembering that sometimes, oftentimes, we need that community support also. And even if you're an herbalist or a coach or whatever it is, sometimes you need that nurturance from other people as well as being able to rely on yourself
Yeah,
in different moments.
totally. And I feel so nurtured by my nest that I'm sitting in right now. I
Mm,
was able to move my production facility downstairs, and I live on the top floor, and I have this gorgeous garden that I built. And I was able to be here when all of this happened in a neighborhood. I mean, I live right above the river that flooded. I am right above it. And I saw, I mean, it was surreal, like I said. It was unbelievable, the
mm,
vantage point that we have being a few hundred feet above the French Broad here. But to be in this space of, wow, like I actually feel really safe here. And
wow.
my neighbors are awesome. And to be here versus where I could have been if I didn't move months
Mm,
prior, I would have still been over there, like in that part of town, in that situation. And so it was this preemptive, get up and move and get reestablished because something's coming.
mm,
And
mhm.
I didn't know what that was. Here we are. So
Yeah. And I feel like I could keep talking to you forever, and I'm
I
like
love
hesitant to ever end this conversation. And I do want to ask because I'm like, should I ask? Should I not? I do want to ask, what has helped you discern when to endure and when to make a change?
values, values, and coming back to my values. I think I also, from a good place, a well-intended place, used to go from the heart, but now it's more the nervous system as well.
Mhm.
It's my digestive system. I'm like, how is my body
Mm,
even processing this? Am I sleeping good? Am
mm,
I digesting good? Am I feeling good being in proximity to this part of my reality? And I'm also, my power of authority is to talk, if you can't tell. So
yeah.
I am very grateful that I have this, as a nomadic person who is a social butterfly and dances amongst many communities. I deal with cycles of feeling very connected and also very isolated. And I have been able to weave this beautiful network of women around the country and the world, a couple handfuls of women who I can lean into. And a
Mm,
few of them, we can just process party in the depths of where we need to go in
mm,
order to really just like work things out. This is a part of myself that I'm really trying to love right now because it's felt difficult to the ways that I'm taking up space and the space that I'm trying to create in my life. I've just become hyper aware and being somebody who's really aware of my impact on the earth. I also want to be more aware of my impact on humanity and my relationships. And I think that having safe space, having sanctuary in the way that I process and feeling connected to people where I can do that
Mm.
is one of the biggest gifts in discernment because it's like the way that I process. And so there's that too.
Mm.
Yeah, and staying hydrated. I'm like dehydrated right now, to be honest. Like we've got the heater on, like I'm like drying out like a prune, and I'm like, wow,
Mm.
I should not be making any decisions right now.
Mm.
Like I need to drink double the water. It's that's part of the transition, right, into these colder months is turning on the fire,
Mm.
drying things
Mm.
out.
So what I'm hearing that you shared, that if someone's listening and they're in this question of, okay, should I endure this relationship, this living situation, this job, this whatever, some things that have helped you are, number one, being able to be clear about your values and know, is this compromising my values right now, or is this honoring and aligning with my values? And if not, that might be a time to make a change. And then number two, to tune into your body wisdom and notice, how's my nervous system right now? How's my digestion system right now? How's my heart right now? What impact, is this experience having on me internally? And just be aware of that and notice that. And then you talked about community processing and knowing yourself as someone who really gets a lot of value in talking things through with someone. So I think that could be something that works for other people too, of having a supportive community around you that you can talk things through, that you can feel seen and heard in. And also this awareness of what helps you process and integrate. For someone else, they might be very internal and maybe they want to journal or do something else. But to have that space, whether it's with like-minded people or practices that serve you to go through that processing integration
Yeah.
practice. And then you talked about hydration. And I know you know way more about water than me. And what I do know about water is we need it. Our brains need it to think
Or
clearly.
water.
Right. So people might not think of, oh, how does water relate to your ability to make choices? And it helps you be clear minded and think clearly. And
Connect
yeah.
to your body, connect to your surroundings.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can give some homework to our
Mhm.
listeners,
Yes. Bring it on.
some homework I want to give y'all is, when thinking about endurance, right? Is there a conversation that you've been meaning to have with yourself or with somebody that you're not stoked to have, or that seems really hard, or it doesn't seem like the right time, and so you're just avoiding it? My homework is to lean into that and to try and have that conversation, because I will tell you, it's just like going to the gym. The hardest part about working out is actually getting in the car and showing
Mm.
up. Once you get there, it's flow time. And so I feel the same about these conversations that a lot of us are withholding,
Mm.
and the stories that get woven out of nowhere about how we feel or how we feel they feel or what have you. And it can become really toxic, and it can become the opposite of hydration. It can dehydrate our ability to respond, to engage, and to be people who can make these shifts within our own realities, to really take agency for yourself. And so
Mhm.
my homework is to lead into one of those hard conversations and maybe drink a hydration martini while you're at it.
Yes.
That's one of my best selling products that have
Mhm.
literally helped me come back into myself and not only hydrate or create hydration efficiency, but keep my detox pathways open so that I can just move things through this vessel that, I'm not going to lie, is like very hard to exist in. However, there's a lot of plants out there
Mm.
that really are here to engage with us, and they've got us. We've got them. There's an allyship happening with every breath that we take outside.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I'm just hearing like risk tolerance, what you were talking about before, of what makes the people in this community in Asheville special or strong or resilient. And even when you're talking about have that conversation, if there's a conversation or something you've been putting off, that when you build a tolerance for risk, you're able to take on bigger and bigger things. And if that conversation is super scary, maybe start with what's the baby conversation or the baby thing that you haven't been wanting to take that risk, but you can start building that muscle, like going to
Yeah.
the gym, and build your capacity to take risk little by little and believe and trust in your ability to navigate that. Because,
Mm.
there's so many fears, and this is like a whole other conversation, fears that come with taking risks and feeling your feelings and all.
Yeah. And the opposite of fear is love. So, maybe I'm just a hippie from Asheville saying this, but love is strong. Love is power. Like love is where it's at. It's
Mhm.
real. And we can transmute so much of our fear with love. And not
Mhm.
what we are told love is, but what love feels like to us. And again, that's that coming back home to ourselves. And even as many times as I've moved, the more that I can come home to this body that I'm in, the
Mhm.
more love I can experience with myself. And that fills
Mhm.
my cup so that I can keep doing what I'm doing for
Mhm.
community, for myself, for the earth. It's
Mhm.
really just coming home to ourselves, honestly.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is like a common thread that I'm seeing now throughout the entire conversation we've been having of your intention and your energy. What's the intention that you're pouring into the service that you're offering other people? Maybe you have a business or whatever it is, or your energy behind an interaction with someone, or the energy you bring to a challenging conversation. Like, how do you want to show up? What's the frequency you want to emit in the world? And how can you step into
Yeah.
that energy of love or whatever it
Yeah.
is?
And you're not going to get there if you don't slow down every once in a while. You're not.
Yes.
I couldn't. So many
Yeah.
of us can't. Like, we have to slow down. And oftentimes it can be scary and overwhelming to slow down, and then everything comes to the surface. And, what I can offer in this moment is like, when you slow down, know that you don't have to deal with everything all at once. Just pick a couple things and spend 6 months to a year on that. And
Mhm.
then take time to celebrate and integrate, and then maybe go back in, because life is a constant process of purging and surrendering and just letting go when you can get into that frequency, and it's liberating. It's true freedom.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's also awesome.
Well, what you just said might be the answer to the question that I'm about to ask you. And if there was one thing that you want people to remember from this conversation, what might that be?
To remember, I'd say to, trust in ourselves and look for ways in which you can nurture your curiosity.
Trust yourself, find ways to nurture your curiosity. Beautiful. Oh my gosh, Wren, thank you so much for this conversation. I cannot wait to share it. And I want to listen to the previous conversation that we had because now I'm like water, thinking about all these things. So we'll post all the resources that we talked about, and you are a gift. And just thank you for the work that you're doing in your community, in the world.
Mm, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today. I
Mm,
thoroughly enjoyed it. And
awesome.
yeah, thank you so much.